Hello, my name is Yvonne Liu, and I'm going to read from the first chapter of my memoir in progress, Left to be Found. If my birth mother gave me a name, it vanished along with her in the Hong Kong night like incense, leaving only questions that haunt me to this day. I was one of about 20 babies abandoned in Hong Kong every day. Our tiny lives began in the shadows of darkness in the British colony. Most were girls. Our futures were as uncertain as the fog that cloaked Victoria Harbor. Our mothers wrapped us in whatever they could spare, a worn blanket, a thin shirt, or yesterday's newspaper. They abandoned us on orphanage doorsteps or at Anglican or Catholic churches. Some left us at wet markets among vegetable crates and baskets of fish. We were the lucky ones. Our mothers wanted us to be found. Others left their newborns on the hills of Kowloon or in dumpsters and alleys to die. I had spent hours picturing the last day my birth mother and I were together. Each detail crystallized from a mixture of longing and imagination. She was 20, with honey brown eyes and silk black hair that fell like a curtain as she nursed me. Her fingers, calloused from work but gentle in their touch, traced the curve of my cheek. The cotton of her well-worn cheapah rustled as she paced a spare room. My imagined mother, my first mother's hands probably shook as she wrapped me in a faded blanket. The coarse fabric held the ghost of her scent. Her tears dotted her face like rain as she memorized every detail. My tiny earlobes, my perfect toes, the rhythm of my breathing. The basket she placed me in reeked of the sweet potatoes it had once held. And then she left me in a stairwell. Her goodbye echoed like a soft prayer. Be strong, little one. 30 years passed with no trace of my biological mother. I had no trinket, no photo, not a scrap of paper. However, on the eve of my breast cancer surgery, when she thought I might die, my second mother, my adopted mother, divulged a decades-old message from my birth mother that she had hidden from me. The note said, "Never forget me. I will never forget you." Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Joann Deiudicibus, and I'm going to read a poem called Kept from my new chapbook, Lost and Found, from Finishing Line Press. Kept. What named us strange, Mother, who uttered us into this life, then dug us up with forked tongues? We, furious flowers left to odd lands, called by another name. Stargazers whose rootedness would not take. What little did we know except we were born to hunger. Lilies too mirror and multiply, lifting awaited faces toward sky. Left alone, tubers twin as life performs its parlor trick again and again. It takes a river of stars to make a galaxy, and one electrostatic bolt to birth a god. You named me blessing at first sight. I named you ray of light, but called you refraction. Yet etchings inscribe who we thought we were. Free of flesh, we wish there were no secrets left. Mother, I'm calling for answers caught in history's throat, cut to bear the labor of language. Dubbed bastards at birth, we've gone by our Latin names, epithets, aliases, anything to be known. Thank you.
My name is César Augusto. I'm an international interracial adoptee from Peru. The piece I'm going to share is dealing with the concept of the ghost kingdom that many adoptees are familiar with. The poem's called Imagination. Every once in a while, I allow my imagination to wander. We were all instructed to participate in this cognitive playground. Constructed cumulus projections, fantasizing capital accumulation, or like my friends, disassociating from the violence at home. Imagination, a blueprint for isolation. Every once in a while, I allow my imagination to take me away from home, back to home, 5,000 to 12,000 feet above sea level. Here, seaweed and rural conservatism is transformed into Takanakui and Pachamama, synthesized fractions of home held together by my imagination. I imagine no longer living as a melanated accessory in the diaspora. I imagine hearing my name as a commonality instead of a lesson in displacement. I imagine my fear, anger, and abandonment gone.
Dovetails by E.J. Clarence. My mother and father missed it all. Bunnykins to bomber jackets, dummies to cigarettes. I was raised somewhere else, given another mum, a different dad. Handed around until I stuck like stickle bricks to my brand new brother, who was also riding the magic carousel of secret adoption circa 1970. Our shared reality was a fantasy land. All the colours cried themselves to a blur as our families moved on without us. I spent my childhood learning to speak like other people, imprinting a way of dressing and eating and living like entirely other people. I was told to call them Mum and Dad, and I did. Compliance was everything in the suburban household of Mum and Dad. I did whatever I was told until the tightly wound rubber band that bound me to my fictional family began to stretch and perish. At high school, it completely snapped. At 16, all the other girls were playing records and watching Home and Away. Not me. I turned the TV off and followed the silvery streets and flashing lights all the way to the city to meet my mother. Yes, that's right, my mother. There, I've said it. My mother, my other mother. My real mother, my birth mother, or whatever it's fashionable to call her now. I was only ever born once. Though the way I've lived, I have my doubts about how many times it's been. The whole routine has been confusing. for me and for anyone else who's tried to follow along. For most people, mum and mother are the same person. For me, they are as different as blood and air. Mum raised me, but my mother birthed me. Stuff that's usually bound up in one package was split into two, bifurcated, branched, chaotic. The whole idea of adoption is a mindfuck, really, especially secret adoption, or forced adoption, as it's officially known in Australia, because it requires all the characters to pretend that a made-up story is real.
This is an excerpt from my memoir piece that was published online by Narratively in 2022. The story includes references to racism and racist slurs. Living with a skinhead while living in my brown skin. I was 15 years old and right on time for my curfew. Once inside, I quickly kicked off my muddy tennis shoes and placed them on the shoe rack. I didn't have to look around to see whose shoes were missing. I already knew. Without removing my jacket, I hurried across the hallway into my room and closed the door behind me. I stood frozen against the door, waiting to thaw. I locked it. I was alone. I slid my right hand through the thick, coarse, jet black hair on the back of my head. It was still there, the bulge, where my head had hit the ground on a small tree stump earlier that evening. I traced my fingers lightly around the area, still hurting, just like it had been for some time now, even before tonight. Before there were steel-toed boots and skinheads. Before my older stepbrother, Tobias, became one of them. I had already felt it all. I just didn't know how to put words to it. I was Swedish. My skin was brown. Nothing made sense to me. Tobias and I had been part of the same family for the past 3 years since I was 12. His dad, Rickard, was my mom's partner, whom she had met a year after my dad passed away when I was 10. The first couple of years of us all living together, Tobias was the type of stepbrother who just seemed clumsy, socially awkward. He didn't know any of the cool kids in class, and he only had one friend, and they stayed home on weekends and watched Rambo movies. To me, he was a nobody. I didn't think he cared about it that much, but he proved me wrong. One night during that time, Tobias and his dad, Rickard, were watching the hockey game in the other room. I had just made a cheese and cucumber sandwich in the kitchen and was about to sit down when they too came in to grab a snack. "Do you know why Negroes don't play hockey?" Rickard asked, pulling a loaf of bread out of the bag. As usual, he spoke as though he was talking about the weather. "Because they have smaller brains?" Tobias answered with a mouthful of food. "No, because they have weak Achilles tendons," Rickard said. "Have you ever seen them play in the NHL?" "No," Tobias answered. It's because their Achilles tendon isn't as strong as in white people's bodies. They can't handle being in ice skates for that long. They have Achilles tendons built for running. That's why they're so good at it." Rickard was content about this information. "Oh yeah, that's why those Negroes are so fast," Tobias said. He squinted his eyes and nodded like he'd just come up with a genius idea. "You know, nature is quite amazing like that. It creates people for what they're meant to do," Rickard said as he put butter on a piece of toast and continued. "It's also why Asians are so short. They're meant to pick rice." There was an awkward pause that only I seemed to notice as they put leverpastej and pickles back in the fridge. I'm not sure if that all is true," I tried. "Of course it is, duh," Tobias said. "Why are we not then starving like all those Africans?" The way Rickard spoke about people and race seemed to be his way of bonding. He may not have intended for his opinions to turn malicious, but his ideas planted themselves as seeds in Tobias's head. Ideas that grew deeper and larger in one way and frighteningly narrow at the same time. By the time we reached the early 1990s, Sweden had become what Rickard called too soft. Tobias, on the other hand, had become the opposite. He went from a nobody who made inappropriate, ignorant comments about people from other countries to believing that it was his right as part of the Aryan race to be superior. His clumsiness turned into unpredictable rage, his social awkwardness into fearlessness. It was like he had merged into a different body, one that stood up straight, walked with a purpose.
Hi, my name is Lisa MM Butler, and this is from an essay I wrote called I Will Survive. Last night, my friend asked me, "Do you call yourself an adoption survivor?" This question really blew my mind because no, I don't ever consider myself an adoption survivor. I consider many adopted folks adoption survivors, but for some reason I don't reserve the term for myself. That made me wonder, why not? Why do I so willingly accept and assign this label to others, but don't feel like it represents me? I've had many of the same struggles as other adoptees. I've had to erase myself like other adoptees. I've lived in fear, I've faced rejection, and yet my relinquishment has always felt like my fault. This internalized self-blame makes me feel as though I'm not in the same class as my peers. They were often stolen or their mothers coerced. Not mine. My mother willingly, at 18 years old, gave me away. For the better part of my life, I have lied and told people my birth mother was only 15 or 16 when she had me. Why? It shamed me to think and to tell people that my 18-year-old adult mother gave me up. If she was 15, it made it sound more like her fault, or it at least made it sense that she couldn't be my caretaker. If she was 18, what excuse was there? In fact, I told this lie to my own husband until he very recently asked me about it and I cleared the air. I was too ashamed to tell the human who loves me most in this world, for fear he'd see I was damaged goods. If my own mother wants nothing to do with me, what does that say about me? I am now, of course, old enough and wise enough to know my adoption isn't and wasn't my fault, rationally. I know racism was the reason I was relinquished. I also know that my mother was coerced in some fashion by her family and by society to relinquish me. The way her family speaks about her, even today, I know my birth mother never had any support. And yet I have internalized myself as undesirable. I feel unlovable, I feel worthless, and I've felt this way my whole life. Doesn't that mean I am a survivor? When I think of my young self now, yes, she was scared and desperate. Yes, she seemed to lack morals and values at times, but she also survived. She survived being removed from her birth mother after the comfort of her womb for 9 months. She survived being left alone in a hospital at 0 years old. She survived whatever unknowns happened to her for the first 2 months of her life. She survived being given to strangers. She survived growing up in Wyoming and being raised by a white family. She survived her lifelong depression and anxiety that went untreated. She survived feeling like her value was tied to her performance. She survived feeling absolutely worthless and unlovable. She survived adoption. Thank you.
And I'm going to read a piece called Waiting and Watching that I wrote to my bio mom. I'm not sure where to start. I'm dumbfounded by feeling your presence, knowing you left this world 19 years before I knew you existed. When she handed me the angel you made, she explained she didn't have anything that had been yours, but she had something you'd made. It was hard for her to give it up because it was crafted by your hands. She said when she felt the impulse to release it, her first thought was, come on, not that. But the impulse only grew stronger, so she gave in. When she handed the angel to me, made out of an old hymnal, my first urge was to open it and see what hymn it was folded to. I have no idea what compelled me, but I did it. Immediately, I lost my breath and bearings. There in front of me was a clear message from you, waiting and watching, in bold at the top of the page. It felt if I just knew the right spot to look, I'd see you staring down at me and smiling. I know what you had to do left a hole in your heart for the rest of your life. My hope is that for the past 20 years, you've been able to watch me grow as a husband, father, and man. And I hope you know it's okay and there's nothing I hold against you. All I could do was carry the angel back to my car, look up, and say thank you. I felt a peace come over me like a warm blanket being wrapped around me. I believe one day we'll see each other again and finally be able to embrace. Until then, please just keep waiting and watching. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Audsley, and I'm the author of Landlocked X, and I'm going to read a poem from my book. When my mother returns as X. When my mother returns as X, she multiplies herself to be every single living thing, a cloud of butterflies, 6 calves grazing in the field beyond the pines, grass bending to the wind's steady pressure. She's a swarm of bees seeking the dust of golden pollen hidden in the cups of poppies. She's an X, marks the spot where she made me, the hand that never fed me, imprinting my DNA a second time. She's a white moon tipped over, brimming with milk for a body that's not there. She multiplies herself to be every form, the breeze lifting the white curtain, a pink silver-edged cloud expanding, the night coming on. When my mother returns, she is the bitter in my mouth I can't dilute. She swells inside. She's the branch from which birds will never fly. Thanks so much, everyone. This book is about my adoptee experience, growing up in rural Vermont, and a trip I took to Korea to attempt to meet my biological father. And I hope you find something out of it if you get a copy. And thank you so much for being here together in community with fellow adoptees. These spaces are really special. Thank you.
My name is Kumar Jensen. I'm reading the ending to my short story titled Nabalantium. Myra took a few steps, their boots sinking slowly into the sandy soil. Walking was hard, the wind punishing, but Myra had not survived 21 years on a foreign continent and months on the rolling seas to be stopped by the ground shifting beneath them. They kept taking steps, struggling up the small hill where the Mail monument, a welcome gate of sorts, awaited. As Myra passed through the towering gate, something deep within them stirred, a distant but familiar tug in their chest, something calling to them from a place or time far away. They continued their ascent, trying to ignore the call from within. Myra stopped to catch their breath. They took a long pull of water from the suit's hydration system while staring out at the dusty horizon. Suddenly, a red dot appeared in the upper corner of Myra's helmet visor. Their stomach clenched and they stopped breathing. Moments later, the familiar tune of an incoming call rang throughout their helmet. Myra froze. Terror tore through their body as they muttered, "No, no, no," to themselves. This could not be how it ended. Myra had managed to escape. Their traffickers had missed their chance. Myra was finally, desperately, free. The little red dot blinked on and off, on and off, on and off, half a dozen times, before finally going dark. Myra's heart pounded in their ears as they waited. They dared not move, unsure what would trigger another call, unwilling to test if movement was the culprit. After what Myra was sure were hours, the light blinked on again. This time it remained a solid red. The suit's notification system chimed. Incoming comms. Local control overridden. Shit, Myra thought to themselves. They hadn't disabled the suit's comms system. There was nowhere for Myra to run, nowhere to hide. Before another thought could cross Myra's mind, an unfamiliar voice sparked to life in their helmet, the words a stream of mostly unfamiliar sounds. Nalamatiam, itukipar, kantonu, navalantiam unkalpayarana. Before Myra decided if they were going to respond, they had turned their mic on and blurted out, "What?" They had blown their own cover. The fantasies they had built of reunion with their ancestors came crashing down. They felt the future contract in on itself, pulled back down to earth and stuffed into the cage of their past. But wait, Myra realized. The person on the other end of the feed was speaking a language Myra barely recognized. That person cannot be their traffickers. Myra let out a cautious exhale. The clear, formal voice repeated the words that Myra realized were a greeting. Pear Enna. That was part of asking someone their name. Myra hesitated as silence stretched out in every direction. Then they clicked on their mic. Hi, my name is, Enpeyer. They paused. The name Myra no longer felt right. Not on their tongue, not on this soil. The name their traffickers had given them was another link in the chains of a history they hoped to escape. Shira cleared their throat. Malai Vanakam, they said shakily. Enpeyer Shira. After a moment, the voice on the other end responded. Vanakam Shira. We did not expect any travelers. Please, join us in Scraper 1377. There was a pause, and then, we are sending an escort to welcome you. Welcome to Nabalantium, Shira.
I'm Stacey Balkun. I'm going to read a contrapuntal poem called Bloodline. It begins with an epigraph from Camille Rankin, I don't know my name. I was born in a canyon. I was born nameless, a rib, a dozen ribs, a rabbit heart. I was spring against manzanita, dirt and rabbit foot. I was petted to stone womb, a bat, no, a whole sky of bats, pinkening gilt, skinned golden with sun, whiskey veined. I was a sonnet of bone caging an altar, an antler in velvet rubbed red, born into a bottlenecked and crystallized, slippery cavern, colony of bats resisting the dawn. I was born gilt, skinned in a canyon golden with sun. I was born nameless, whiskey-veined. I was a rib, a dozen ribs, a sonnet of bone caging a rabbit heart. I was an altar, an antler in spring, velvet rubbed against manzanita, red dirt and rabbit foot. I was born in a bottle, necked and petted to stone, crystallized, slippery cavern womb, a bat, no, a colony of bats, whole sky of bats resisting the pinkening dawn. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tiana Nobile, and this is Harlow's Monkey from my book, Cleave. We learned to give ourselves away early on. We used to hide the bruises, used to scratch our arms until they bled, until our body was a weeping wound. The cage exists only in our mind. Kick down the door. Matchstick. Whether of wire or terry cloth, we all burn the same. We gasp for air and taste the bitter juice of roses, petals dried and clipped to the pages of our chest. At the feet of our gods, we pile our bones, muscles threaded to flesh. The fresh liquor of unchained thought burning the roof of our mouths, we take back our tongues, drink handfuls of water. In what shallow grave will we bury the words we killed? Amani, Abaji, Dejun, Moon Youngshin. We deliver them to the dirt mother and her family of worms. The past mushrooms and burns in atomic flush. We sling a new sun from the pit of our stomachs and raise our woolly hands, fingers clenched.
Well, my name is Bruno Giles, and I'm going to read 2 short poems. First one is No Mail Today. Once I wrote a letter to woman called Mom I never knew. Been 60 years that fateful day I can't recall gave me away. Now I wait for her reply. No mail today, I wonder why. Hope she sends a lovely note in answer to the one I wrote. A thoughtful letter she will compose, tear-stained page and regretful prose. All these years, my painful heart, her only child of me she thought, Come to visit, she will ask. Hug, talk, and cry, rewrite our past. Again I walk down long driveway. Metal box opened, no mail today. Called Lost No More. In the park, bright June day, a boy sits alone as sky turns gray. A tear rolls down upon chubby cheek. Our eyes meet, he will not speak. I know this boy, he lives in me. I sit beside him under the maple tree. Hey, young me, I ask, what is wrong? Can't stop crying, birth mother is gone. Who are you? I'm your older self. Why are you here? To repair your health. Boy feels lonely, a bit different too. I feel his pain, I felt it too. You can heal, that I know. You will live, your heart will grow. Our shadows take shape as sun shines through. Clouds dissipate, new hopes anew. Birth mother appears from sun above, her hands extended to show us love. Forgive me, please, I thought it best to let you go, my love suppressed. She says to us, open your hearts, or else you'll both be torn apart. Our mother asks, may I come in? But we're not sure, you committed a sin. Gave us away, we were told, you turned your back and refused to hold. Perhaps in time we will clearly see what you did was best for me. Our hearts now open, all merged into one. Many years later, our pain undone. In our hearts lies an open door. We welcome you in. We are lost no more. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mirella Stoyanova, and I will be reading an excerpt from an essay that was originally published in Write or Die magazine called Loss Side Effects May Include. In Bulgaria, where I am born and live until the age of 5, I lose my life. You never hear it referred to in such a melodramatic way, but that is what it feels like to be adopted at an age you remember. You look out a window and see a mountain or the boy who lives in the flat beside yours. The following week there is a different mountain, a different boy. In truth, I lose the only life I know a year and a half before when my mother dies. We were close throughout my infancy, my mother and I, but I do not attend her funeral. Instead, I hold tight to her memory with a hope familiar to grief that remembering can keep her alive or at the very least lessen the pain of loss. In America, some 20 years later, I say yes to my boyfriend of roughly 1 year when he asks me to marry him on the bow of a sailboat. I am 32. It is the eve of the anniversary of my arrival to the United States, but I do not mention this, figuring too much has happened in the last 24 hours anyway. The day before, I received notice to vacate what was the last foothold in the neighborhood where I spent the majority of my adulthood, becoming who I am, the office where I moved my private therapy practice the month before I met him. The following Monday, my therapist of 12 years announces that he is retiring. I am 5 again. In the 3 months it takes for me to learn English, I forget Bulgarian. My new mother says she can't compete with an angel, but no matter how hard I try, I can't forget the mother who died, so I do not invoke her memory in the presence of my new mother, who is also jealous that I have taken to my new father instead of her. My visa expires, my passport expires, my grandmother who adopted me just after my birth parents died expires. My secret grief is the tattered manila envelope full of pictures I keep hidden beneath my bed, and the red 3-ringed binder full of documents encased in plastic I pour over when no one is looking. Some 20 years later, my boyfriend and I move in together 3 weeks before the world shuts down. I don't plan to give up my apartment in case things don't work out, but when we are forced to return early from a trip to Ireland, I empty what is left of my belongings to keep and take the rest to Goodwill. I become obsessed with home fitness, donate to the blog of the trainer whose classes I used to take, look for him on drives to collect mail at the office in my old neighborhood. Months later, I still look to find familiar faces when I drive through my old neighborhood, but never do. I long to see someone I recognize, be someone I recognize. I wonder why, if I have everything I want, I am so angry and ambivalent about my relationship. I am 5 again. In my new family, I make my bed and wipe the hardwood floors with Windex of my own volition, terrified that I will be returned to a life that no longer exists if I can't find my place. I laugh when my new mom lifts my hair from my face and asks if anyone is in there. I try not to forget that in Bulgaria, I placed first out of hundreds on the admissions exam to an elite preschool ordinarily reserved for the children of state dignitaries, although I often do. I forget a lot.
Hi, my name is Shue, and I'm the author of Bridge of Knots. It's the story of a late discovery adoptee, and it's written in fragments because it reflects how fractured she feels by the news. Section 28. We found you under a haystack, our mother said whenever we asked her to tell us about when we were born. Daddy owned a dairy, so it was not impossible, but we assumed she was joking with us, her silly rabbits. But then my sister and I found out we were adopted, and we decided we were actually mushrooms. Yeah, kept in the dark and covered with shit, my sister remarked. Then the two of us laughed and laughed. 36. After the DNA test results came back and revealed that my sister and I were siblings, but that we weren't biologically related to our parents, I read all the online adoption articles I could find. They had headlines like, "When your father is not your father, DNA tests can reveal more than you bargained for," and "How a DNA testing kit revealed a family secret hidden for 54 years. Well, at least yours is an adoption story, my husband said when I described these articles to him, and not home DNA results linked to cold case murder. I love my husband, but I am the kind of person who will run across the intersection if the pedestrian light is still flashing. My husband will wait if there are 10 seconds or less counting down. This means we have spent a significant portion of our marriage standing on opposite sides of the street. Me waiting impatiently for him waiting for the light to change again, tolerating my impatience. 43. Under the sky, among the trees, I was genderless. Not a woman or a man. I felt most like myself in their arboreal company, as if in a library, in the company of books, leaves of grass. Was I the wave or the rider who missed the wave? The history of the world made up of so much water. What we call orca whales are really the largest dolphins on Earth. Here's a writing prompt. Go outside and listen quietly for 10 minutes. Write a poem to the sounds that you can hear, and then one to the sounds you cannot hear. 55. When I logged on to online adoption discussions, many of the comments went along these lines. Your biological parents gave you up so you would have a better life. You're lucky you grew up in the US and not in China. You know they drown unwanted baby girls in China. Your adopted parents are your real parents. You should be happy. You should be grateful. Your adoptive parents love you. Your birth parents love you. You shouldn't be so needy. They were the same conversations I read about immigration. You're lucky. Forget where you came from. Don't think about that. Don't act like them anymore. Don't talk like them. Don't eat like them. You're living in our country now. We're your family. Be like us. I was a tiger mother before there was a name for it, my mother loves to tell people. It's her love language, written in a tongue I longed to translate. because it was love that drove us all to do what we did, when it should have been the thing that set us free. My parents taught me everything I knew about love, and my children taught me everything I didn't know about love. The tenderness I have for all of them could fill an ocean. There is a bridge in China named the Lucky Knot. In the shape of a Mobius strip, it has no beginning and no end. Pedestrians can cross by passing through 5 round moon gates along the platform's infinite loop, which rises high over the Dragon King Harbor River. Thank you.
There was always a sense of peace, comfort, and serenity at my babysitter's house. I will never forget the day I ventured into my favorite room of her home, Miss Annie Ruth's living room. While she chatted on the phone, I slipped into that beloved room. Sitting there, I let my imagination run wild until I drifted off to sleep. That afternoon, over 40 years ago, I had one of the most vivid dreams of my life. In the dream, I found myself in a room filled with people. I didn't recognize anyone in the room. I saw myself as an adult, and I liked what I saw. I hoped to grow up and become her. Years later, I went off to college, hoping that someday I might wear that beautiful black dress from my dream and step into that imagined moment. I graduated from college, but the dream never materialized. Yet I never stopped believing that the time and circumstances would eventually allow me to experience the glitz and glamour from the dream. One day I will see her, I continue to remind myself. One day I will. In April of 2023, during one of my last conversations with my husband, he asked me, "What are you going to do with your time?" Jokingly, I responded, "I'll write the book." He looked at me and said stoically, "Yeah, you have a story to tell." I believe the question about time referred to the hours I would spend waiting for the surgery to end. When he didn't recover from the surgery, I realized that time wasn't to be measured in hours, but in days, weeks, and months. Several months later, I started to write. I wrote about the grief of living without him and suddenly realized something I had never acknowledged before. I am well acquainted with grief and loss. The grief of separation from the person who carried me secretly for 9 months and abandoned me after I entered the world. Yes, I am acquainted with grief. I wrote about unanswered questions, and I had many. Some related to my husband David, and many related to my bio mom. Why did it happen this way? I had to wrestle to untangle the words and the hurt from the corridors of my mind and heart. But I did have a story to tell, a story of love and loss, a story of rejection and abandonment, a story of heartbreak and heartache. But it is my story, every part of it. As I wrote, often through tears, I began to see her. She was no longer an elusive person enjoying a magical moment in time. I saw her through the tears. I saw her through my pain. The woman I was once chasing began beckoning me to become her. She wasn't trapped in time or space. She was simply waiting for me to recognize who she really was. I'm no longer waiting for that moment to happen, but every time I write about my story, every time I speak about my story, I see her emerging. I am grateful for David. He recognized that I have a story to tell, and for that, I will always be grateful. I will write, I will speak, I will share. Lives depend on it. Mine does.